The end of World War II began a new era of ideological tensions between the two competing global superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. Americans disapproved of the Soviet Union's communist government, viewing it as a threat to their American democracy and capitalism. Communism includes a form of centralized government with the common ownership of the means of production and the absence of social classes, money, and the state. Wisconsin Senator Joe McCarthy began the McCarthyism movement in 1950 with the announcement of 205 communists within the State Department. Instantly, fear was instilled in the American public of Soviet espionage. McCarthyism was widespread and included many investigations and false accusations of communist loyalty that had serious consequences. Fear of the severe consequences of McCarthyism accusations encouraged the public to conform to the system in a self-preserving protection. During this era, Americans feared two main things about McCarthyism. Firstly, people were afraid of McCarthyism itself. There began a widespread panic of communism, espionage, and takeover. American paranoia was rooted in the belief that communism threatened the interests or ideals of free society. Communism stood for the opposite of what the American dream represented: their freedom, their individuality, and even their way of living. Secondly, the people feared the persecution of McCarthyism. People accused of communism received strong ridicule, and their tainted reputation would be nearly impossible to fix. One 1950s novelist, Harold Brodkey, recorded that the fear of communism was perpetrated by government officials. It appeared that no one knew how to act. It felt as if this were a country consisting entirely of recent converts, and everyone went on tiptoe. The baseless claims could have a huge impact on their work, social, and personal lives. As the fear of McCarthyism spread, an accusation of being in any relation to a communist belief would end in social suicide. The public had the power to accuse others of being communist, causing members of the public to be pinned against each other. As the public's fear and paranoia of communism spread, teachers, professors, immigrants, and especially government employees were subject to the most questioning on communist affiliation. Government employees have been targeted since the start because of their possible access to classified information that made them powerful Soviet spies and a threat to U.S. security. However, once accused, they were encouraged to reveal any known communists to lessen their personal punishment, thus starting a cycle of false accusations. McCarthyism used fear tactics to ignite a widespread paranoia about communism. However, the public had a valid premise on which to believe this new fear. After World War II debuted the atomic bomb, the fear of the USSR launching a nuclear attack on the United States began. The Rosenberg case was so impactful in encouraging anti-communist mentalities, since the couple was accused of leaking information about the atomic bomb to the Soviet Union. Giving the enemy access to such powerful information put the whole country at risk for decades. The American public saw the Soviet as a threat to their lives through nuclear war, making it easier for them to believe the communist accusations of McCarthyism were true and should be taken seriously. While there was an initial valid concern that inclined people to be against communism, McCarthyism targeted people's natural instinct to conform. McCarthyism punished anyone who did not agree with it, with the evidence that only a communism would criticize a system that negatively affected communists. Therefore, few people had the courage to speak against McCarthyism, and the few who did ended up being accused and ultimately discrediting their claims. By witnessing the fate of anti-McCarthyism supporters, the general and neutral public felt pressured to conform to McCarthyism to protect themselves. McCarthyism claims resulted in not only career end, but also severe social consequences, since people would not want to be around alleged communists, since it could be used as a leverage for their personal accusations. The Crucible, by Arthur Miller, tells the dramatic story of a theocratic Puritan society. A young girl, Abigail Williams, manages to cause chaos by accusing community members of witchcraft. Since the community centers law around religion, any act contrary to religion can be punishable by death. Williams, however, does not have a reasonable claim to accuse these people. She made up the accusations to save herself from personal witchcraft accusations. She, along with her friends, who are a part of the act, accuse anyone who tries to discredit them, creating a cycle of hollow accusations that lead to the death of community members. This forces the citizens of the town to conform to the system. They must not speak out or defend any accused if they wish to stay alive. The Crucible parallels McCarthyism, since both have accusations rooted in self-preservation that end with extreme consequences. The government believed that TV and movies could shape American culture and beliefs, leading Hollywood to be a common target of communist speculation. During the McCarthyism era, over 150 Hollywood figures and 300 actors and TV writers were blacklisted from false accusations of communist affiliation. Even Lucille Ball, a longtime comedy actress and star of American television, was investigated for having leftist roots. Lucille Ball admitted to registering as a communist in 1936, but explained that she had never voted for the party or was ever a party member. Luckily for the well-known actress, she was cleared by the House of Un-American Activities Committee by the director J. Edgar Hoover. Hoover later voiced that I Love Lucy was one of his favorites of the entertainment world. However, not all the people in Hollywood were as fortunate to be sent off with a little slap on the wrist. Judy Holliday was another name of the list on the 151 entertainment industry members with affiliations with communists. She suffered from her appearance on the Red Channel's list, being called to testify at the Senate International Security Subcommittee, and later being blacklisted from radio and television for around 3 years. The fear that pushes us into conformity is still present today as the technology age introduced cancel culture. Cancel culture involves publicly shunning a figure due to their socially and morally unacceptable views. While cancel culture can stop the spread of bad ideas, the canceling can just as easily silence any unmalicious opinions, enforcing uniformity of thought. Similar to McCarthyism, any attempt to defend someone who is canceled will lead to being canceled yourself. Cancel culture is seen as a modern online version of a witch hunt guided by mob mentality and often based on speculations or rumors that can lead to unprecedented levels of humiliation and reputation damage. Canceling may result in attacks on social media, losing a job, or company boycotts as a punishment for different thinking. The spread of woke cancel culture has reached the publishing industry, like old Hollywood during McCarthyism, with its best-selling authors like J.K. Rowling and Dr. Seuss being canceled for their beliefs. In 1954, Senator Joseph McCarthy's investigation of security threats in the U.S. Army and members of the administration itself was televised. His behavior was described as contrary to senatorial traditions. This ultimately turned the public's opinion against him, pushing the Senate to finally shut down McCarthy's reckless abuse of power. The Senate passed a motion of condemnation in December of 1954 with the voting of 67 to 22, bringing McCarthy to an end. 3 years later, Joseph McCarthy died from alcohol abuse. Fear motivates people to act in self-preservation, causing people to turn on each other. In both McCarthyism and the Crucible, the communities have an understanding of how severe the consequences of their action will be, but they continue to accuse each other even when it leads to death or imprisonment. While the legitimate fears connected to the Soviet Union, like nuclear war, fueled McCarthyism ideals, it was mainly the fears surrounding consequences that pushed the public into conformity. It is important to understand the power of fear as it appeals to our human nature to prevent instances like McCarthyism to plague our society again.